under the cool, crystalline light of an endless blue sky and pristine white expanses. A young man, passionate about indigenous lore and deeply immersed in the study of ancient cultures, drifted into a dream that felt more like a transcendent journey than sleep itself. In this surreal vision, he found himself wandering across boundless fields of glistening snow, where the air vibrated with the silent heartbeat of the Arctic. The world around him was impossibly vivid, every flake of snow, every ripple on a vast frozen plain, shone with an almost supernatural clarity, and the sky overhead pulsed with an unyielding, serene blue that seemed to promise both hope and uncertainty. Almost immediately, his dream introduced him to the protagonists of an ancient conflict. He encountered a gigantic polar bear, its enormous form both noble and raw, scratching its powerful claws along a stretch of smooth, untouched ice. There was something uncanny about this bear. As he watched, it released a low rumble that carried the cadence of human speech, as if it were trying to communicate age-old wisdom or perhaps a warning. At that very moment, a shriek, otherworldly and chilling, tore through the silence. From the periphery of this immaculate scene, a gaunt figure emerged, a Wendigo, its form shifting between a lean, almost spectral human-like shape and the semblance of a deer with twisting antlers. Its voice, harsh and ragged, echoed throughout the dreamscape, sending shivers of both terror and absurdity across the ice. The dream world, fluid and ever-changing, soon became a sprawling tapestry of surreal landscapes. He wandered through vast, wind-blown ice forests where towering, frost-covered pines stood like silent sentinels guarding secret memories. Deep in one such forest, he discovered a labyrinthine ice cave with walls that shimmered like stained glass. Inside, the interplay of light and shadow wove patterns that seemed to narrate long-forgotten legends. It was here that he witnessed an unlikely scene. An ancient tribe, clad in ceremonial garb and faces etched with both valor and sorrow, was locked in fierce combat with a squad of Wendigo shapeshifters. The tribe's warriors shouted incantations in a tongue older than the snow, their voices resonating against the ice. In a moment both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring, a huge polar bear appeared to assist the tribal defenders, its eyes burning with a fierce determination, as if its very presence invoked the ancient guardians of the land. Time and space in the dream blurred further with each step of his journey. On a vast, radiant ice field, surreal and unbound by the rules of everyday life, the dreamer found himself thrust into the midst of a chaotic confrontation. In this incandescent arena, he saw the Wendigo and the polar bear locked in a titanic struggle. The Wendigo, shifting and sinuous, darted with unnatural speed, its elongated claws carving through the air in a display both terrifying and strangely comical. In contrast, the polar bear, a creature of raw, elemental power despite its gaunt appearance, lunged forward with crushing force. The air was filled with the echoes of roars and spectral shrieks. Set against a backdrop of stark, sunlit snow that glittered like shards of glass, each collision of paw against claw sent tremors rippling across the ice, shattering fragments that danced briefly in the brilliant light. Amid the unfolding melee, our dreamer, caught in the midst of this savage ballet, found himself inexplicably drawn into the conflict. Every time he moved to help the polar bear, the Wendigo's malevolent presence surged toward him, its eyes locking onto his with a predatory glint. He experienced vivid sensations as if he were physically threatened. Goosebumps erupted along his arms and his heart pounded with an urgent mix of fear and determination. The dream forced him into a crushing dilemma. He was compelled to choose between aligning himself with the noble polar bear, symbolizing the last pure vestige of nature's ancient strength, or succumbing to the seductive, dark allure of the Wendigo, which promised him supernatural power in exchange for a curse that would forever haunt his soul. In a climactic sequence that defied rationality and soared into the realm of myth, the dream presented him with a final, impossible choice. The polar bear and the Wendigo, locked in their titanic duel, became the living embodiment of an eternal conflict, one that was both tragic and darkly absurd. As the confrontation peaked, the dreamer found himself standing at a surreal crossroads. One path whispered of protection, of preserving the wild, untamed spirit represented by the polar bear. The other, insidiously seductive, beckoned with the promise of dark, irresistible power offered by the Wendigo. In that moment of excruciating indecision, amid a blinding array of polarized light and shifting shadows, he raised his voice in a desperate cry, a cry of both defiance and resignation, and in doing so, he interposed himself between the two forces. For an agonizing, heart-stopping moment, the dream seemed to demand a sacrifice. Perhaps he would give up his own identity, willingly surrendering himself to become an eternal guardian of the wild, or a cursed vessel forever marked by the dark presence he so deeply feared. Then, as if the weight of his choice could no longer be borne, the dream shattered. With a jolt of blinding clarity, he awoke in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, his heart hammering against his ribs, as if he had truly traversed that haunted Arctic wilderness. In the immediate aftermath of his awakening, he discovered a startling, inexplicable detail: a set of delicate claw marks imprinted upon the sleeve of his shirt, and a solitary droplet of melting ice clinging to the corner of his room's window. A physical echo of the surreal confrontation that had unfolded in his dreams. As daylight broke through his room's curtains, soft rays mingled with the residual chill of the night, and he was left with a lingering, disquieting question that now blurred the line between dream and reality. Had the polar bear and the cursed Wendigo truly visited his subconscious? Or was there something far more mystifying at play? A spectral visitation in the realm of the living? His mind reeled with possibilities, each one as tantalizing as it was terrifying. The experience, stretched out over what felt like an eternity in the dream world, left him both haunted and inexplicably hopeful. A hope that perhaps the ancient forces he had studied so obsessively might not be confined solely to legends but might yet whisper their truths to those who dared to dream. In the days that followed, as he pored over ancient texts and interviewed elders steeped in indigenous lore, he found his world irrevocably altered. His research, once a pursuit of distant, mythic knowledge, now carried the weight of personal experience, a blurred, enigmatic encounter that defied simple explanation. Each time he saw a polar bear on a nature documentary, or heard rumors of Wendigo sightings in the remote woods of Canada, his heart would quicken with both wonder and dread, the lines between myth and memory becoming ever more indistinct. And so, with a profound mixture of reverence and lingering trepidation, he resolved to continue his research, forever carrying the indelible imprint of that surreal, fateful night, a night when the wild, untamed heart of the Arctic revealed itself in a dream that challenged everything he thought he knew about nature, power, and the eternal dance between light and dark. In this second phase of his surreal odyssey, the young researcher finds himself wandering along winding, frost-covered trails that lead him into a forest of ice. The trees here are colossal and draped in shimmering icicles that catch the light with spectral radiance. As he moves through this haunting woodland, every branch and snowflake seems infused with the legends he has so avidly studied. The air is crisp, and with each breath, he feels the weight of forgotten tales, that this place once belonged to a proud people who revered the polar bear as a guardian and feared the Wendigo as the embodiment of human corruption. Within the forest, the dreamscape shifts unexpectedly. A narrow passage opens into a cavernous ice cave, its walls translucent and decorated with ancient, frost-etched symbols that pulsate softly in the ethereal glow. Here, the dream takes on an almost ritualistic atmosphere. The light from the full moon refracts through the cave, casting kaleidoscopic reflections that dance along the frozen surface, as if the very soul of the land were trying to communicate its secrets. Venturing further inside, our dreamer stumbles upon an astonishing scene. A spectral reenactment of an age-old battle unfolds before him. In a vast, echoing chamber within the cave, he sees a group of indigenous warriors, clad in antique ceremonial garb and bearing the dignity of long-forgotten ancestors, locked in combat with a swirling, restless Wendigo. The creature, now in one of its many guises, shifts subtly between the semblance of a half-human, half-deer figure and a more abstract form of raw, tattered shadow. The warriors, their voices low and resonant with ancient chants, battle the creature with both skill and desperation. In the midst of this conflict, a giant polar bear emerges as if summoned from the depths of his own memories. The bear's presence is both majestic and oddly reassuring. Its eyes convey a quiet authority, and in a voice that seems, at times, to echo the cadence of human speech, It roars a rallying cry that reverberates through the cavern's icy expanse. As the dreamer watches this bizarre, almost cinematic battle, his own emotions become intertwined with the unfolding drama. Every time he dares to approach the bear, moved by a deep-seated desire to help and protect, the ghostly specter of the Wendigo seems to divert its malevolent attention toward him. In one surreal instance, as he steps forward with trembling resolve to assist the mighty bear, the Wendigo's form swoops around him, its twisted visage looming impossibly close. A shiver runs down his spine as he feels its cold, spectral energy graze his skin, a whisper of something dark and ancient mingling with the Arctic wind. Though part of him is filled with awe at the raw, primal beauty of nature's might, another part recoils in terror at the intimate brush with a curse that has haunted his studies and nightmares for years. Driven by a combination of academic passion and visceral fear, our dreamer embarks on a symbolic pilgrimage across this dreamscape. He navigates narrow, treacherous paths along shimmering ice floes and through dense clusters of frost-rimmed trees. At times, the environment shifts so quickly that he finds himself momentarily lost in a world where the ice seems to breathe and the very ground pulses with the rhythm of ancient rites. Occasionally, the Wendigo's form appears in the periphery, slithering and contorting with such fluidity that it seems to dissolve into the air, only to reappear with a sudden, chilling intensity. Other moments reveal the polar bear offering silent assistance to the tribal warriors, its eyes softening as if communicating a promise of protection, a promise that resonates deep within our dreamer's heart. Throughout his journey, the dream's surreal logic challenges him to question his deepest beliefs about nature and humanity. The polar bear, in moments of startling lucidity, appears to speak in a low, resonant tone, its voice echoing the wisdom of the ancient wild and urging him to choose the path of preservation. Conversely, the Wendigo, with its seductive yet menacing allure, tempts him with whispers of supernatural power and the promise of transcending mortal limits, if only he would forsake his commitment to protect the sacred natural order. Torn between these two forces, one representing the unyielding, pure spirit of the wild, the other, the dark, seductive promise of forbidden knowledge, he stands at a crossroads in this dreamscape. In one climactic sequence, as he treads carefully along a narrow ridge overlooking a vast, reflective lake of undisturbed ice, the specters of the polar bear and the Wendigo converge in a final, mesmerizing duel. The bear's massive form moves with ancient, deliberate grace, while the Wendigo twists and writhes in a spectral dance that defies human understanding. Their roars and cries, a dissonant chorus of nature's might and human sorrow, fill the air with a palpable tension. Caught in the midst of this epic confrontation, our dreamer feels the weight of an impossible decision pressing upon him. Should he harness the invigorating, albeit daunting, raw power of the polar bear, or succumb to the dark allure of the Wendigo and the supernatural gifts it promises? Each moment magnifies the surreal stakes as the battle intensifies around him, the ice beneath his feet shimmering with the energy of a world caught between renewal and damnation. As the dream's narrative progresses, the emotional intensity climbs, the scenery, bathed in the pure, unfiltered brightness of Arctic daylight, transforms subtly from a realm of pristine snow to a chaotic interplay of light and shadow, a world where every reflective surface seems to hold the secret of an ancient, eternal battle. Driven by his own terror and the instinct to protect what he holds dear, he timidly reaches out to help a battered polar bear caught in a moment of peril, only to find the Wendigo's form twisting around him in a silent threat. The tension mounts with every step he takes on the treacherous ice, each encounter drawing him deeper into a chasm of conflicting loyalties and primal, almost unbearable choices. In this surreal journey, every image seems to pulse with dual meanings, a laughing echo of folklore and a scream of existential dread. The polar bear, imbued with the fierce yet gentle spirit of the Arctic, roams as a guardian of hope, while the Wendigo's ever-changing guise offers both terror and a strangely magnetic allure. Caught between these forces, our dreamer's heart races as he navigates a labyrinth of icy corridors, his senses overwhelmed by the absurdity and gravity of his experiences. Below is the final installment of Polar Bear vs. Wendigo, in a Dream, rendered in immersive American English continuous prose for voiceover adaptation. This concluding chapter plunges our dreamer into the decisive moments of his surreal, nightmarish journey, a confrontation where the ancient forces of the wild and forbidden power collide, forcing an impossible choice that may forever blur the lines between myth and reality. Under a luminous, full moon that stained the endless white of the Arctic with silver radiance, our dreamer reached the ultimate crossroads of his otherworldly odyssey. The endless snowfields and crystalline ice formations, once objects of serene beauty, now thrummed with a primal urgency and haunted unpredictability. At last, the surreal dreamscape unveiled its climax. Before him, on a narrow ridge of glistening ice suspended between the darkening forest and an infinite blue horizon, the two titanic forces converged in a battle of fates. To his left, a majestic polar bear, its enormous form both noble and raw, stood with eyes that glowed with the wisdom of countless winters. Its presence radiated an aura of protective strength and dignified melancholy, a living embodiment of the wild's enduring spirit. The bear's majestic mane, touched with streaks of silver despite the ravages of hunger and time, seemed to call to the dreamer with silent authority, inviting him to preserve the ancient balance that had once defined a pristine world. To his right, the cursed Wendigo manifested in all its uncanny, shifting terror. Its gaunt, tortured features flickered between forms, the visage of a half-human, half-deer specter with twisted antlers and a voice that resonated with the bitterness of lost eras. The creature's eyes burned with a malevolent, hypnotic fire, its spectral form constantly reconfiguring with a disturbing fluidity that spoke of ancient curses and the insidious power of forbidden hunger. Its approach was measured, predatory, yet cloaked in a seductive promise of supernatural strength, a treacherous lure to those who might surrender to its dark embrace. Suspended at that moment on the frozen ridge, the dreamer felt his heart torn between two irreconcilable choices. The polar bear represented hope, a chance to defend the fragile sanctity of nature and to preserve the purity of an ancient legacy. The Wendigo, on the other hand, offered an allure that whispered of untold power and mystical metamorphosis, yet at the terrible cost of one's soul being ensnared in its ceaseless, cursed hunger. In his mind, the echoes of countless indigenous legends and the pages of ancient texts blurred together. He recalled how the bear had long been revered as a guardian spirit, while the Wendigo was doomed to wander as an unyielding specter of human greed and despair. As the chilling wind swept across the ridge, carrying with it flakes of shimmering ice and the faint murmur of long-forgotten incantations, the dreamer knew that the time for decision had come. In a moment that felt as though it stretched into infinity, he found himself standing at the threshold of his own destiny, his every sense sharpened by the surreal intensity of the situation. Before him, the bear's eyes seemed to plead for protection from the Wendigo, a seductive but sinister force promised untamed, otherworldly power. The weight of choice was almost unbearable. Could he choose to ally with the noble creature and ensure that the wild might endure? Or would he be tempted by the dark magic of the Wendigo, gaining supernatural strength at the bitter price of eternal damnation? In that agonizing moment of indecision, as the two titanic forces locked eyes in a battle that transcended time itself, the dreamer raised his voice, part shout, part plea, to break the paralyzing silence. "No more," he cried, his voice echoing like a rallying war cry across the frozen expanse. In that desperate outburst, as if the very power of nature and curse were being forcefully realigned by his will, he stepped forward, interposing himself between the polar bear and the Wendigo. With a final, resounding cry, he threw his arms wide in an almost ritualistic gesture, as if offering himself as a sacrifice to break the ancient cycle, a selfless act intended to tip the scales in favor of the living wild. For what felt like a heart-stopping eternity, the air around him vibrated with the collision of forces. The polar bear lowered its noble head, its eyes softening with a mix of empathy and fierce determination. The Wendigo paused, its spectral form trembling with an indecipherable mix of malevolence and uncertainty, as if caught between its predatory urge and a sudden, inexplicable hesitation at the sight of the dreamer's sacrifice. In that moment, the dreamer felt himself engulfed by an overwhelming surge of both fear and awe, a tidal rush of emotion that blurred the boundaries of his own identity with the raw, uncontrolled essence of the wild. And then, as suddenly as the moment had crescendoed, Everything fractured. The piercing light of a full-throated cry shattered the surreal darkness. And the dreamer felt an immense pull, as if he were being swept away by a powerful current. His vision blurred into a dizzying array of sparkling ice and molten gold, the bear and the Wendigo. Their forms caught in an eternal tableau of conflict, receded into indistinct shapes as the world around him dissolved into a chaotic, breathtaking dreamscape. With a sharp jolt, he awoke in the cold dark of his room. Sweat dampened his skin, his heart pounding as if it had run 1,000 miles. For several disorienting seconds, reality and dream intermingled, the lingering taste of Arctic air and spectral roars still echoing in his ears. As he sat up slowly, the room filled with the soft hush of early morning light, he noticed something startling: a few delicate scratch marks on the sleeve of his shirt and a tiny droplet of melting ice clinging to the corner of his desk. The evidence was subtle yet inescapable, a physical echo of a dream that felt all too real. In the quiet that followed, as the dreamer contemplated the vivid, surreal journey he had just experienced, a persistent question took root in his mind. Had the polar bear and the cursed Wendigo truly visited him in the realm of dreams? Or was there a more mysterious, inexplicable truth at play, a dark, ancient visitation that blurred the lines between myth and reality? The answer, elusive and haunting, lingered at the edge of his consciousness. His nights would henceforth be marked by both wonder and apprehension, for every time he glanced at the small, inexplicable marks on his skin or felt a chill in the quiet of the night, he was reminded of that fateful crossing of worlds. Thus, with the echo of that extraordinary dream reverberating in his heart, the young researcher resolved to delve deeper into the mysteries of his cultural heritage. He pored over ancient texts, revisited old legends, and sought the counsel of indigenous elders, all the while haunted by the memory of the surreal, impossible confrontation in the snowy realm of his subconscious. In every whispered legend, in every half-remembered dream, the question persisted: had the wild, untamed spirit of the polar bear and the dark, seductive curse of the Wendigo merely been symbols of his own inner turmoil? Or was there an undeniable truth that the ancient forces of nature still roamed the world, waiting, like silent guardians or vengeful specters, for their moment to awaken? Under a sky awash in the soft, diffused light of early morning, light that seemed to seep through the long shadows of the Arctic and reveal fleeting secrets, the dreamer found himself standing at the edge of a vast, crystalline expanse. Here, the world of his vivid dream and the harsh silence of the frozen wild merged into a liminal space that defied easy explanation. The polar bear and the Wendigo, those two eternal symbols locked in an otherworldly contest, now occupied a space that felt both achingly real and impossibly surreal. The polar bear, regal and immense even in its slight distress, bore the dignified imprint of countless winters. Its eyes shone with a fierce, unyielding fire, a fire that spoke of nature's raw, untamed spirit and its unwavering commitment to protect the sanctity of life. In stark contrast, the Wendigo's form seemed to waver between corporeal menace and fleeting shadow, its every gesture steeped in a chill malice that recalled the darkest corners of ancient lore. As the dreamer observed, the battlefield, a vast, open plain of snow and shimmering ice, began to shift with a mesmerizing fluidity. There were moments when the polar bear appeared to speak in a language older than time, its low, resonant growls echoing with unfamiliar words that somehow carried the weight of ancestral wisdom. The Wendigo, meanwhile, glided with a balletic yet dreadful grace, its antler-like protrusions glistening in the pale light as it advanced with a terrifying deliberateness. In this ephemeral arena, the boundaries between the seen and unseen blurred. The crisp clarity of the surrounding white was punctuated by flashes of spectral light in shifting forms that challenged every notion of reality. At the heart of this intense confrontation, the dreamer, caught between the magnetic call of nature's unyielding guardianship and the sinister allure of forbidden power, felt the weight of a decision bearing down upon him. In the dream's narrative, two paths stretched before him. One path led toward aligning with the polar bear, embodying the hope, resilience, and enduring purity of the untamed wild. The other, darker and more seductive, promised supernatural power and transformation should he yield to the beckoning whispers of the Wendigo. The air around him thrummed with tension, as if the very fabric of the dream itself demanded a choice that would irrevocably alter his destiny. Every fiber of his being trembled with the enormity of that moment. The polar bear, standing as a beacon of fierce natural grace, seemed to silently implore him, "Protect what is wild and undefiled." Meanwhile, the Wendigo's shifting form, moving with an otherworldly fluidity, murmured softly of hidden power and transformation, an offer laced with peril and eternal consequence. For what felt like an eternity in that suspended moment, the dreamer struggled to decipher which voice he would heed, the call of wild, uncorrupted nature or the seductive murmur of ancient, vengeful myth. The tension broke when, in an act that defied all rational expectation, the dreamer stepped forward and cried out, a single, desperate proclamation that reverberated through the silent, icy void. No, his voice, a raw and shattering exclamation of defiance, interrupted the spectral duel. In that instant, something remarkable happened. The polar bear's majestic eyes softened as if in silent gratitude, and the Wendigo's expression faltered, its shifting, malevolent form momentarily pausing in indecision. Time itself seemed to yield to that outcry, the harsh landscape, the glacial winds, even the very shadows, all stilled as if waiting for the scales of fate to tip. In that climactic moment, the dreamer's heart pounded not with fear but with a potent mix of sorrow, defiance, and a glimmer of hope that transcended the boundaries between dream and reality. The two primal forces, the steadfast spirit of the polar bear and the dark, insidious lure of the Wendigo, seemed to hold their breath, locked in a timeless battle that now pivoted on his singular, trembling decision. In the suspended silence that followed his cry, he felt an overwhelming surge of clarity. His choice, though rendered in that ephemeral world of dreams, resonated with an ineffable truth, that even in the face of ancient curses and the darkest seductions, the wild spirit of life must be preserved at all costs. And then, with a resounding, almost celestial release, the dream shattered. His eyes snapped open in the quiet darkness of his room, slick with sweat, heart pounding as if heralding the birth of a new, unsettling reality. For several disorienting seconds, the chill of his dream lingered, a vivid afterimage of a majestic polar bear's resolute gaze and the ghostly echo of a Wendigo's lament. As he slowly became aware of his surroundings, the dreamer noticed subtle traces that confirmed the night's extraordinary vision. A faint mark resembling claw scratches on the edge of his shirt. A solitary droplet of melting ice clinging to the window, glistening like a secret message from the other realm. In the stillness of that early morning, as light crept across his room in gentle hues, he was left with a haunting, unanswerable question. Had the polar bear and the cursed Wendigo truly visited him in his dream? Or had they transcended the boundaries of sleep to leave an indelible imprint on his waking world? The possibility that ancient, powerful entities might one day breach the veil between myth and reality stirred a quiet anxiety deep within him, a mixture of awe, dread, and the fierce desire to understand. Thus, with the lingering images of that surreal, fateful night etched into his mind, the dreamer resolved to immerse himself even further in the ancient lore of his people. He began poring over dusty tomes, consulting with indigenous elders whose eyes held the secrets of generations, and revisiting every film and document that spoke of polar bears and Wendigos. Every encounter, every whispered legend, and every half-remembered vision led him deeper into the mysterious interplay between nature's primal forces and the haunted recesses of the human psyche. In the weeks that followed, the boundaries between his dreams and waking life grew ever more tenuous. At times, he would catch a glimpse of a colossal polar bear on a distant horizon, or hear the echo of a chilling, half-remembered howl carried on the wind, moments that left him questioning whether his surreal journey had been nothing more than an elaborate nightmare or a window into a hidden reality. And so, with each passing day, his conviction deepened, that somewhere, between the stark, unforgiving beauty of the Arctic and the dark, seductive power of ancient curses, lay a truth as old as time itself, a truth that demanded both reverence and relentless vigilance.